Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. I'm decent in the kitchen, but I'm not much of a baker, which is why I was thankful for today's interview, just in time for the holidays, is with Rose Levy Beranbaum, author of The Cake Bible. If you're not into baking lore, this book first came out in 1988, and it was pretty monumental. It became a go-to resource for home bakers and professionals. But a long time has passed since that book first came out, and Beranbaum is out with a new version, accounting for new technology and some new techniques. But the spirit, the philosophy of the book is still the same. She spoke with Here and Now's Robin Young about the one important thing baking amateurs like me should watch out for. That's ahead.
This message comes from Wise, the app for doing things in other currencies. Send, spend, or receive money internationally and always get the real-time mid-market exchange rate with no hidden fees. Download the Wise app today or visit wise.com. T's and C's apply.
If you're a regular listener of the Book of the Day podcast, then you probably enjoy some other NPR podcasts too. With NPR Plus, you get perks like sponsor-free listening, bonus episodes, early access, shop discounts, and more for over 20 different NPR podcasts just like this one. So start supporting what you love and stop hearing promos like this one at plus.npr.org.
When Rose Levy Beranbaum's Cake Bible was first published on the fortuitous date of August 8th, 1988, or 8/8/88, you could hear a pin drop. Okay, maybe not everywhere, but in the world of baking, there was a collective intake of air, a gasp, because the wheel had just been reinvented. Sure, there are other cake books, but this one was the first to list ingredients by weight instead of volume. It introduced reverse creaming, mash up the flour and butter first instead of butter and sugar. And charts, so many charts, one of them finally explaining the differences between cakes based on the percentage of eggs, flour, liquid, and fat in every one. In short, the Cake Bible was a cheat sheet to success. So why a revised 35th anniversary edition when bakers are still using their batter-stained, note-covered first edition? Let us ask author and cake goddess Rose Levy Beranbaum. Welcome back.
Thank you, and I love every word of what you said.
Okay, goodbye. Well, your first edition, you were literally borrowing friends' tablecloths to take pictures. And do I understand you believe so much in the book that you told your editor you were willing to write all 1,000 pages without pay?
It's true, and I have to tell you that the friend that loaned me, among other things, her tablecloth, the cover, just turned 100.
And she's still here to admire this book. But why a new book?
Well, ingredients have changed and equipment has changed. But the significant thing about equipment is that most cake pans now are 2 inches high. And they were 1.5 inches, and that makes a big difference. But also, there are a lot of new things, and it's a larger book. Plus, I wanted to have a picture of every cake. And I did not get a picture of every cake in the initial one, but in this one, we have just about 99% of the cakes is pictured.
I'm going to do something the audio engineer is going to be upset about. I'm going to drop this book on the table. I mean, that's a book. It's a brick of a book. Talk about some of the other newer things. Bleached cake flour is harder to find. Younger laying hens reduce the proportion of yolk to white. These little details matter.
Really, more than people would imagine. And it took a long time to find out why the yolks are smaller. Everybody's noticing this. And it was finally somebody who had raised chickens at home. He said, industry is using the younger laying hens because they are less expensive. But the thing is that the egg yolks are what they call emulsifiers. They don't just give a beautiful color and flavor, but they also mix other ingredients more evenely, right. So you get a finer crumb. And you can really see the difference when instead of getting 6 yolks that it calls for, you're really only getting 4. So this is why we give people the instructions, if they're using whole eggs even, to separate and weigh or at least measure the yolks and the whites and then put them back together.
Oh, look at that. And while we're with eggs, you can freeze egg whites if you're just using the yolk and, let's say, a pastry, and you can freeze the egg white and use it later?
Not only can you freeze it, but you can freeze it for months. And in the back of the book, there's a whole page saying cakes that can be made with just whites, cakes that are made with just yolks.
I have to add, too, though, Rose, you changed. You want cakes to be more simple.
Yeah, especially the decorative aspect of it. I mean, I still put how to pipe because some people want to make like rosettes or maybe trim the border. But I do very little piping. I don't remember when the last time I got out my tubes. And also the bundt cakes, the bundt pans, they create their own beautiful designs. So if it's a moist cake, you don't need the buttercream.
It's rare that you hear the line, I can't remember the last time I got out my tubes for piping a cake. By the way, one other thing is that there were cakes that you loved in the first book, but you've actually changed those original recipes. Can you just mention one?
The chocolate domingo. I thought it was the ultimate. It's the cake that had the most possible butter of any cake, of a butter cake, but it could be more perfect by using 1 tablespoon of boiling water to add to the cocoa, and that brings out the flavor and makes a better texture.
Okay, this is the Placido Domingo cake,
Yeah.
your love letter to the tenor. How do you find out adding a little water changes everything?
I was the first consultant ever to be invited to Procter & Gamble for their cake mixes. And I asked to speak to the head scientist, who was so delighted because nobody ever paid attention to him. And he told me that the flavors of chocolate are locked into each cell of cocoa, so that by adding boiling water, it bursts through and ruptures that membrane and releases the flavor.
Well, now to add to the chocolate Domingo, you have the Renee Fleming Golden Chiffon. You call it the soprano of golden lemon cakes.
Well, chiffon cakes are traditionally made with a centered tube. And it's not just a tradition. They may fall out of the pan if they don't have that support.
Like a bundt, yeah.
Yeah, but we worked out a way to make it so that we could make it in a pan without the tube. And it has the most gossamer, amazing texture.
Okay, there's that. We should say for first-time bakers, these are accessible. But for that beginner, what's the biggest mistake you want beginners to watch out for?
Well, substituting ingredients is one, but I would say the number one thing is flour, because if you don't use bleach flour, the cakes can have a coarser texture, it will fall in the center. If you don't weigh the flour and you don't measure carefully, you're going to end up with so much more flour than was intended, and what's going to happen is the cake will be dry. Actually, I think that these cakes are more user-friendly than other ones simply because the reverse creaming method is so much simpler. You take the butter and the flour and the leavening and the salt and the sugar, and you mix it all together, all the dry ingredients and the butter. And you mix it with a little bit of the yolk and the liquid, which is milk or buttermilk or sour cream. And then you add the rest of the egg mixture with the rest of the liquid in 2 or 3 stages afterwards. So it's just 1, 2, 3. It's so quick and easy, and there's much less cleanup.
Some other tips for everybody. What kind of oil should you choose for a cake?
I use oil that doesn't have any flavor, like canola or even sunflower or safflower. But actually, one of the tips that is really important is not unmolding a pan too quickly, when it comes out of the oven. If it's a cake pan, you'd want it, a standard cake pan, you'd want 10 minutes. And if it's a bundt pan, 15.
That answers the question, because people worry that if you leave it in the cake tin too long, that tin's hot, it's going to keep cooking it. But if you take it out too soon, you're left with 4 pieces of cake that you now have to spackle together with your frosting.
Exactly. But another issue is that if you let it sit too long, it may want to adhere to the bottom if it's solid.
Yeah.
So, there are all these little things that I love to tell people because it makes a huge difference. And people write on our blog and ask questions, and my husband Woody answers them because we got so busy working on this book and all the writing that I had to do, I couldn't keep up with the blog.
I'm looking at Woody right now. Hi, Woody. You have had great partners in pulling this together. I just want to highlight a cake that I just thought was one of the most beautiful I've ever seen. It's the White Lilac Nostalgia Cake, pale yellow icing with pink raspberry buttercream, real lilacs on top. You quote Patricia Hempel's memoir, The Florist's Daughter, in which she writes about your cake. The lilac nostalgia stood at attention, its lavender medallions like so many medals for valor on its soldier's chest, a cake in dress uniform. What's it like to have your cake elevated in that way?
It actually gives me the chills just hearing this again because it was a total surprise. And then I'd learned that my favorite author, the late Pat Conroy, wrote somewhere that Pat Hempel was his favorite of all American poets.
Well, it's quite an honor. And it's a beautiful cake. Do you have a favorite?
The triple chocolate proposal is my favorite visually because of the chocolate praline leaves that, well, we call them leaves, but sheets that fold over the cake, and they're never the same way twice. It's tricky. Yeah. You need an infrared thermometer and a hairdryer at the same time because the minute it starts looking like it's ready to fold, it's too late and it's going to drop. And the triple lemon velvet bundt cake is my favorite yellow cake. My favorite chocolate cake is the Domingo.
Yeah, there you go. Boy, Rose Levy Beranbaum, how does that feel to know people who have set off on, kind of life journeys of their own with cake because of your books?
I have to tell you that if anybody asked what I think my greatest accomplishment is, it's connecting to other people and changing their lives, which also has changed my lives. I've had more than one life, it's true.
Well, I hope you feel it on this tour. Rose Levy Beranbaum, author of the award-winning 1988 Cake Bible. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Robin.
This is Ira Glass of This American Life. Each week on our show, we choose a theme, tell different stories on that theme. All right, I'm just going to stop right there. You're listening to an NPR podcast. Chances are you know our show. So instead, I'm going to tell you, we've just been on a run of really good shows lately. Some big, epic, emotional stories, and some weird, funny stuff, too. Download us, This American Life.
Joe Biden's on his way out, and Donald Trump's on his way back. Want to know what's happening as the presidential transition is underway? The NPR Politics Podcast has you covered with the latest news and analysis. Listen to the NPR Politics Podcast.
Ever look up at the stars and wonder, what's out there? On Shortwave, we ask big questions about our universe. From baby galaxies to the search for alien life, we explore the celestial science behind these questions. Listen now to the Shortwave Podcast from NPR.